take risk, but take risk in a small way if you're trying to start out and build a business. But like we talked about earlier, like fail small, but think big. So think about where you want to go, grand vision, but find little inherent, like little chunks that you can build at a time so that you don't just bet the whole farm on one decision. That would be my advice.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with the patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Flint Holbrook. And Flint is a quick introduction. So in high school, was always trying to build things, taught himself how to weld and how to program. Went off to Oklahoma State and got an engineering degree. At the end of college, didn't want to be a true engineer, so or just sitting on a computer drafting things. Wanted to go into business, so applied for MBA school. During that process, started a trucking company and got to get 3 years of experience before doing the MBA degree. Oil industry got hit hard, shut down the business around 2016, went back, got the MBA, and then started a new business with our software business for the trucking company. So with that much as introduction, welcome on the podcast, Flint.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Devin. Great to be here.
Hey, absolutely excited to have you on. So I just gave the short and condensed version of a much longer journey. So why don't we unpack that a bit and tell us a little bit about how things got started in high school, always liking to build things.
Yeah. I don't know. I was just programmed that way, I guess. I just always kind of wanted to know like how stuff worked, right? Take it apart, put it back together. I was kind of a weirdo, honestly. Like my parents were like, man, most kids are like playing football and like out hanging out with their friends. Our son is like, out in the garage building things. Like this is a little weird. But yeah, I don't know. I just enjoyed it, right? And so it started small, like, hey, I'll take this thing apart, whatever it was, and put it back together. And then it's like, hey, I actually think I could build a better one. So then I would build a better one, right? So like you kind of gain all these skills along the way. Like you learn, hey, I need to know how to weld today, so I'm going to learn. I need to know how to electrical stuff works, so I'm going to learn, right? So I don't know. I built a lot of skills, just kind of the old-fashioned try it way.
So now, and I think that's a great thing. And, even if you're not going to become an expert, and even if you don't utilize all those skills, I think even just getting that mindset of, hey, I'm going to go out. If I need to figure something out, I'll put in the time and the effort to figure it out. I'll have another skill set in the toolbox. And if I don't use them all, it'll still be a good one that I can have for the future if I at least have that or ability to do so. So
yeah,
now
and I think you also, Devin, like build. I think it's maybe even less about the skills that you pick up through that process. It's almost more about like the ability to figure things out. Because while I don't go out and weld every day as a guy in software, like I definitely rely on those skills of, well, I have this problem in front of me that's pretty gnarly and hairy, and like I got to break this thing down and understand it and find a solution, right? So, I think those small experiences lead you to who you are and what you're able to do.
No, I think that definitely makes perfect sense and is correct. So now so you're going in high school, kind of figuring out how to build things a bit and how to, gain different skills. And so you go off to college and go to Oklahoma State and get your engineering degree, and kind of tell us how that went and kind of
it would seem like the natural fit, right? For a guy that likes to build stuff, like you need to go, you should go study engineering. So I did that. Like I enjoyed it. Obviously, like built a lot of good knowledge. But then I like kind of got to my senior year, and all the you go to the career fair, right? And everybody's recruiting engineers. It's a very it's good if you're an engineer, like everybody wants you. But at the same time, like none of the jobs that were out there seemed that interesting to me. Like it was. I mean, I remember one of my classmates like went to work for Boeing, and he was going to be like the guy that drafted and was responsible for one little part in the wheel assembly of a Boeing 737. Like that's what his career was going to be. And it's like, that's great. That's really cool. But that's not what I want to do, right? I don't want to live behind the computer and be responsible for this one little thing. And, so it made me think like, actually, I'd like to combine some of these skills with something in business. I also learned, I did an internship and I also learned I just don't work for people very well. Like I'm just not the kind of guy that, I don't know, like tell me to do something and I don't get why I'm doing it. And I just learned, maybe I just had bad managers, but I just realized that wasn't for me. So
no, and I smile because I went a different direction, but I also got an engineering background, so I ended up getting 4 degrees, one of which was electrical engineering, and I kind of hit the same thing. If I got to the end of engineering school as undergraduate and said, "Hey, I like engineering, but I want to be an electrical engineer," same thing. When I look at it, you're on the same project for months or years. You're a very small cog in a big wheel, and you really don't, in order to have any real impact or even view of what the company is going, you have to be there for years and you have to have a lot of experience and you're going to have to do a lot of grinding. And it just doesn't make for a very, for probably some of your personality.
I remember, Devin, an interview I had, and they had like one of the senior engineers in the interview, and I was like, well, tell me about the career trajectory. And he was like, well, for about 10 years, you would be responsible for like one subassembly. And then like after that, we might, like you may have a few engineers beneath you that are responsible for a subassembly, and like you might be responsible for like an axle or like a hood latch or something. And I was like, oh my God, you mean I'm going to spend 20 years here and my sole focus is a hood latch? Like, no, I'm good. I'm going to pass, right? So yeah, that's what it like. But that's great. Like those people need to exist because we need to go out and buy vehicles and airplanes and like all this stuff has to work. But it just wasn't. So
no, I'm right there with you. And so I said, I think that, there's certainly a very big place for those type of people, and some people enjoy it and it makes it, it's fun for them. And yet you get to the point where saying, hey, that's not where I want to take my career and that's not where I want to head. And so with that, now you're saying, okay, I want to take it in a different direction. Kind of where did that take you? I think you started to look into MBA school, but kind of
Right. So I started to apply for jobs. Like I would go to the business career fair when I was in college and like throw in, then they would be like, oh no, you're an engineering degree. Like, we don't need you here. So that really just quite honestly kind of pissed me off. So I was like, well, screw you guys. You don't think I've got a business degree? I'll go get a business degree. So I threw in an application to get an MBA, like just kind of angry about the situation. They let me in. I said, yeah, cool. You can get an MBA, but you can't actually show up here to start until you get at least 2 years of real world work experience. So that was kind of how that unfolded. So then I kind of had like I don't know, let's call it a get out of jail free card, right? To go do something really interesting, knowing that in 2 years I would go get an MBA and probably remake my entire path. So that's what I did.
So now I said, okay. And I think one you mentioned, which is a bit different than the MBA program I went through, is they required, was it 3 years or 2 or 3 years of experience?
At least 2. Yeah, they said at least 2, but you could do up to 4. So like if you get out there and you're just loving life and you're like, hey, I want to work another year, no big deal.
So, and that was a little bit different. So I'll give you my background, and I'm not trying to by any means take over your journey, but I went through, got my engineering degree and my Chinese degree, and I just went right from undergraduate to graduate school and got my law degree and my MBA degree. So I figured, hey, if I stop and I try and go out and I start getting an income and start working and have my family, it's going to be a ton harder to jump back out. So yeah. Interesting that, some MBA programs, the different requirements they have. So anyway, nonetheless, MBA program says, okay, you can do it, you're accepted, but you have to go and get at least 2 years of work experience. So how did you decide what you were going to do to get that experience?
Well, it was a little bit of a happenstance thing. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and was living in Dallas, Fort Worth, kind of doing some IT stuff, like, figuring it out, right? First few months out of college. And I met a gentleman at an airport bar that was telling me all about the trucking industry and specifically FedEx contracting. And like, this guy had this big trucking company, but they hauled freight exclusively for FedEx, and they had this perpetual contract. And I was like, wow, sounds like a pretty good business, right? So slept on it. The next morning, still pretty interested in it. I just picked up the phone, called FedEx, the local FedEx terminal, and I was like, hey, I want to come work for you guys as a contractor and haul some freight. And the guy like almost laughed me out of the room, right? Because I'm like 23 years old, no money, no experience. But I happened to call him. This was like right after Thanksgiving, because I think I met the guy like on a flight back to Dallas from Thanksgiving or something to that effect. And so, obviously like the busy Christmas shipping season. And so this guy's super short capacity at FedEx. He's evidently got his hind end in a ringer because they can't move all their freight. So he was kind of like, well, look, I mean, if you can show up with 2 trucks and you've got some drivers, like I'll give you a contract for the absolute bottom of the barrel level work, right? Like literally starting at the bottom in their ecosystem. So I did it. I went to Freightliner and I was like, guys, if I've got a perpetual agreement to haul stuff for FedEx, will you loan me, give me financing to buy 2 tractor, semi tractors? And they're like, yeah, sure, I guess. So I go back to FedEx and I'm like, hey, Freightliner says that they'll give me the trucks if you give me the contract. So he was like, fine, we'll sign the contract. And Freightliner had the trucks on the lot, and literally a week later, I'm in the trucking business.
Sounds like a pretty quick journey to get into the trucking business. So
yeah.
So now you get into the trucking business, and I think you mentioned you did it for about 3 years. Is that right?
Yep, about 3 years. So I went out and hired drivers and like learned really quick how to be a manager at 23 years old, because I made a lot of mistakes through that process in managing people. I grew that business. We hauled stuff for FedEx. And then I also on the side said, look, I understand the economics now of this business. I just need to increase my scale because trucking is really kind of a scale business. It's pennies margin, but you need big scale to generate, dollar margin. So I kept buying trucks, kept buying trailers, got into flatbed, like specialized, heavy, tall, wide, interesting, hauling very interesting hardware, and grew this business like I think we were 30 something trucks in 2016, like just grinding it out. Like this was not an easy business to manage, to run. It's not big enough to have a management team, but it's big enough to have all the headaches and all the challenges as an entrepreneur that you have to deal with, like staffing and compliance, heavily regulated business. Very competitive, like pretty crappy industry dynamic. And so anyway, everything's going pretty good. I'm generating cash. And then in 2016, oil markets go crazy. Oil goes negative, drilling stops. All the big rigs that were working in the oil field hauling frac sand and everything that the oil field requires said, hey, I'll go get a flatbed trailer and I'll enter that market because there's no sand to haul. And so the competitive dynamic like changed within a 2-week period. Like rates just plummeted in terms of what we could get on the market for our services. So anyway, got to manage through that. Was quite challenging. A lot of stress. Ended up selling part of the business, kind of shuttering the other part of the business. Lost a little bit of money through the process, but learned some really valuable lessons. And the timing worked out. Like, and I was ready to go off to school. So,
no, it makes perfect sense. So you say, okay, hey, got some good experience. Was out in the real world. Got to get some of that background. Business is becoming harder. The background is, and so now, hey, I'm gonna leverage that and then go out and go back to school and get the MBA degree, which is kind of always the plan. So went and got the MBA degree, I believe, and did that for a few years.
2 years, yeah, it took 2 years, and like through that process, right, I kind of got to reflect because when things go bad, I mean, I'm sure people have been there. Like you don't in the moment you don't really think about what led to this thing kind of going sideways. Like you're very much in the trenches of trying to accomplish whatever you need to accomplish for the day. And so anyway, going to school, it kind of gave me the opportunity to reflect on, what could I have done better? Was this were my skills well aligned to the business that I got myself into? Where does your passion lie? Where can you have the biggest impact? These kind of questions, right? So it kind of gave me plus you learned a bunch of stuff during the MBA program, but it gave you some time to kind of sit back and think.
No, makes perfect sense. So now you sit back and you think, sit back and think after you get the MBA degree, and kind of how did you figure out where you wanted to go, or what was the next step, or kind of, what would, or now where are you going to take the MBA degree and having that kind of a real world experience coupled with the educational one? Where did you decide to go from there?
Yeah, well, I just started thinking through like what do I want to do? Think about the past, think about the future. Where do I want to go? And I figured out, well, I probably want to be an entrepreneur. And I had a really hard time. One of my big failings in my trucking company was I just had no operating systems. Like I was always shooting from the hip, right? Like phone calls, text messages, emails. I didn't have a golden Bible, right, that told me the status of my company every day. So I set out to build one. I just thought, there's got to be some other people that are having the same challenges that I had, and can I build something that would solve those challenges? And I started in a very small way, kind of MVP style, and got a little bit of traction, and just kind of kept snowballing into what's now TruckSpy, like an all-in-one, telematics platform with, I don't know, probably 500,000 lines of code, and we do all kinds of really cool stuff for our customers, right? So just, that's the journey, right? You just, okay, I'm going to test this, right? What is it? You want to fail small, right? So think big and fail small. So go out and put a little MVP together and say, okay, well, if I get 10 customers, then I'll spend some more time on it. So you got 10 customers. So now let's go to the next level. And we just kind of kept stair stepping, over a almost 5-year period.
No, makes sense. And I said, I think it is. You put out that initial, initial product. I always hate the term MVP, not because I don't think it's accurate, but in my mind, for whatever reason, always evokes put out the crappiest product as quick as you can.
Right. Yeah.
Pay for it. And in my mind, it's always more. We always use the minimally viable skateboard, which is, hey, you build something that's good, but it's simple, and then you see if people will pay for it, and then if you do, then you go from the skateboard to the bike, to the car type of thing. And so it sounds like you guys went on that trajectory and kind of built it, got some traction, continued to build it, got more traction, and continued to invest in it. So kind of now catch us up. Where's it at today, and kind of where have you guys built it to?
Yeah, so 400 customers roughly right now, supporting like 7,000 to 8,000 tractor trailers or fleet vehicles on the roadway. We're all the technology that you need in the cab of a commercial vehicle. I mean, we're gonna AI dash cameras that can detect drivers picking up their phone, give them audible alerts, say, hey, pay attention to the road. One of our things we're probably most proud of is that we keep the public. We like to think that we really help keep the public safe in terms of keeping commercial drivers focused on the road, and driving safely. And we see that through our data. I mean, our customers reduce their risky driving behaviors by like 80% in 60 days of rolling us out. We're your ELD, right? All your compliance, your electronic logging device that's required by the federal government. We're your turn-by-turn nav. We're your document management. Like we really do a lot for our fleets, and ultimately it makes them more efficient. It lets them be more strategic. It lets them focus on the higher value stuff in their businesses, and not like managing pictures on their cell phones of documents, right? Like, so stupid what you spend your time on as a manager in that industry. So,
no, sounds like it's been a fun journey, and I'm sure we'll continue to be so. Now, as we've kind of caught up to where you guys are at today, always a great time to transition to the two questions I always ask towards the end of the podcast. So we'll jump to those now. So the first question I always ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made? What'd you learn from it?
Yeah, worst business decision I ever made was entering the trucking industry. I think sometimes as an entrepreneur, you see, like, I think, all right, entrepreneurs tend to be optimistic individuals inherently. And so you can look at a business idea and see all the ways that it will work, but sometimes you miss the ways that it won't work. And I think, like, knowing now, or knowing then what I know now, I would have said, wait a second, this is a really crappy industry. Why do I want to be a startup in a space where there's already big established players, highly competitive, no barriers to entry, right? Like staff, like it's very hard to recruit, retain talent, because it's literally the kind of business that I have to hire one more employee and buy one more truck to grow revenue. Like there's actual work that goes in and expense to growing revenue. Like I think as so I guess my advice would be like, think about what you're walking into and the downside risk and the big picture, right?
No, I think that definitely makes sense. And so with that, now if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one piece of advice you give them?
Yeah, well, all right, good question. I probably answered the second question with first, but I'll actually give you a different.
You did jump to the end. No, it was a great answer. So I'm not faulting.
Yeah, sorry.
We'll just combine the two questions and make it one continuation.
Right. No, I'll shift gears. I'll actually give you a different piece of advice.
All right.
And it'll be kind of go against slightly what I said in number one. Take risk, but take risk in a small way if you're trying to start out and build a business. But like we talked about earlier, like fail small, but think big. So think about where you want to go, grand vision, but find little inherent, like little chunks that you can build at a time so that you don't just bet the whole farm on one decision. That would be my advice.
No, and I think that's a good one. I think that, that kind of almost goes back to what we talked about, minimally viable skateboard, in the sense that, if sometimes you have the inclination when you're building something, especially at least for me, I found that if you have the engineering kind of background and perspective, you always want to make it perfect, or you wanted to make it just right, or you want to have, hey, it needs all of these extra features. Wouldn't these features be cool? And they are. You can build a lot of cool features, and yet sometimes you're going to spend so many time building extra features and different things into it that you never actually get it out in the marketplace. People actually see, and you may have missed the mark. You may not have incorporated the features that people are really asking for because you're so focused on the other things over here. And so I think that that's a great takeaway of, start out, fail small, or build it, fail small, or have success and then build it from there. And I think trying those, but I think you should always continue to try things. In other words, you shouldn't.
Oh, yeah. And you got to talk to your customers, Devin. You got to constantly talk to your customers. Like I don't know how many times software companies specifically, or probably any company, has built things that they think are really cool that nobody cares about, right? like, and that's the advantage of if you're thinking big and building small, you're constantly talking to your customers. How do I improve this? Is this working for you? Et cetera, et cetera. And that then informs what the next little step you need to take is.
No, I think that's definitely a great takeaway. Well, now as we're wrapping up towards the end of the podcast, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably the easiest way. Flint Holbrook. You'll see me pop up with TruckSpy. You can also email me, Flint, Flint, @truckspy.io.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out to connect up, and if nothing else, make a new best friend. And with that, thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's been it's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that are listeners that are out there, if you have your own journey to share and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. So let's go to inventiveguest.com and apply to be on the show. A couple more things as listeners. Make sure to click share, subscribe, and leave us a review so you can help us to share all these amazing journeys with other startups and small businesses. And last but not least, if you ever need help with your startups or your small businesses with patents, trademarks, or copyrights, just reach out to us. Go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Well, thank you again, Flint, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Absolutely. Thanks, Devin.